everyone, and welcome to our third talk in our annual At Home with Mac webinar series, which is generously sponsored by our affinity partner, Manulife. My name is Christine Kennedy, and on behalf of the Office of Alumni Engagement, I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening, yet another cold evening, at least it's cold here in Hamilton, as we discuss a topic that is always very hot, very popular at the beginning of a new year, fitness. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of fitness, I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that the land on which we learn and work here at McMaster takes place on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. The territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Ojibwe and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. So now it is my pleasure to welcome our speaker for the evening, Anjali Bedi. Anjali is a first-year PhD student in kinesiology here at Mac, and she is a member of the NeuroFit Lab run by Dr. Jennifer Heiss, who has been a guest speaker on many occasions for us. Anjali's research examines how modifiable and non-modifiable factors shape dementia across the lifespan, with particular attention to how identity and lived experience influence these relationships. She is passionate about science communication and co-founded a lab-based team dedicated to translating aging and brain health research for broader audiences. Beyond the lab, Anjali has worked with organizations such as the Exercise, Sport, and Movement Journal to promote scientific research through digital media. Her long-term goal is to empower individuals with accessible knowledge about their risk profile, supporting informed and proactive decisions about their well-being. So thank you so much. I'm delighted that you're here, Anjali. So I'll let you take it over.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Christine. So I am going to minimize this right here. All right. So hello. As said, my name is Anjali Bedi, and I'm a PhD student in the NeuroFit Lab in the Department of Kinesiology at McMaster University. I currently work under the supervision of Dr. Jennifer Heiss. I also completed my undergraduate degree here at McMaster, graduating in 2023. That makes me a very new member of the alumni group at McMaster, and I want to thank the Alumni Office for inviting me to give this talk. Brain health is such an important topic that's relevant to people of all ages. So whether you're a new alumni or one that has been a long-standing, proud member of this group, I hope you hear something useful from this talk. So during my undergrad, I had the opportunity to get involved in two research experiences that first sparked my interest in brain health and aging. I really loved that work, which led me to pursue my master's degree and partway through accelerate into the PhD program where I am now. My research focuses on understanding the different factors that contribute to dementia risk in midlife and how the things we can't change, like sex, race, or ethnicity, may affect someone's vulnerability. But just as importantly, my work also looks at the many things we can change, especially lifestyle habits that can help support brain health as we age. Today, it's my pleasure to share why healthy lifestyle habits are so important for the aging brain and to offer some practical tips that I hope can help you make changes that are realistic and stick over time. So, that passion for brain health isn't just academic for me, it's personal. Like many others, one of my favorite people to talk to is my mom. And during one of our conversations, she shared that her biggest fear is losing her sense of self to dementia, something she's currently witnessing her mother experience. She often feels like no matter what she does, it's not enough to stave dementia off. And my mom, like many other people, struggle to fully understand how the day-to-day decisions she makes connects to her brain health over time. That feeling of uncertainty and fear is actually very common. In fact, dementia is one of the most feared diseases in the world, and for good reason. It has the power to take away your personal history, your memories, and parts of what make you, you. And what's worse, there is currently no cure. Unfortunately, we're all at risk, and that's because age is one of the greatest risk factors for dementia. This graph shows how the risk of dementia roughly doubles every 5 years after the age of 50 for both males and females. As the global population continues to age, it's estimated that over 130 million people will be living with dementia by 2050, making it one of the leading causes of disability among older adults. Now, that can feel overwhelming to hear, but this is exactly where I want to pause and tell you something important. There is hope. Although aging is a risk factor, just because we are getting older doesn't mean we're going to get dementia. Furthermore, even if we have a family history of dementia and inherit an unhealthy set of genes, it doesn't guarantee our fate. For example, the apolipoprotein E, APOE gene, has different versions of it, and its E4 version increases your risk of dementia. About 1 in 4 people inherit this unhealthy version. But it's important to note that this does not guarantee a diagnosis of dementia later in life. Nor does it mean that people with a healthy version are protected. And you might be asking yourself why, or how could this be the case? And it's because lifestyle matters too. And it matters more than you may think. It's estimated that approximately 40% of our dementia risk is tied to preventable things. Things like diet, exercise, and sleep. Many of these lifestyle factors are directly tied to resolutions that we make at the start of every year. And if you're anything like me, they involve modifying habits that feel really hard to change and stick to. Today's talk comes at a time when most New Year's resolutions are fading out of people's lives. What I'm hoping today's talk does is remind you of the importance changes you make in your life can have on your brain health as you age, and secondarily, to hopefully add some tools into your life that you can use to help make these habits stick. Now, research from the NeuroFit Lab has shown that lifestyle factors can completely negate a healthy set of genes. Across 1,600 older adults, we found that those who were physically inactive had a similar risk of developing dementia as those who were genetically predisposed. And it was significantly higher than those who were physically active. The results suggest that your activity level contributes to your dementia risk as much as your genetics. From this study comes an extremely helpful finding that I hope serves as your motivation to get active. You can't change your genes, but you can change your lifestyle. Now, to give you a full understanding of how lifestyle can impact brain health to defy dementia, we'll cover 3 things. First, I'll explain how cognition changes with aging. Then I'll review the different pathways to dementia. And third, I'll finally share some of the exciting interventions for brain health that we have investigated in the NeuroFit Lab. Okay, let's get started by exploring how cognition changes with aging. Now, let's consider the hypothetical case of Jessica and examine her trajectory of decline. Jessica is 45 years old, and with hectic family and work life, she finds it impossible to take care of herself. She's not sleeping well, eating well, and you can bet she's not exercising. Even though she is relatively young, the choices she's making now will have an enduring impact on her future brain health. And that's because many of our cognitive abilities peak at the age of 30. Some aspects of cognition, like word knowledge and vocab, will remain strong and even grow throughout our lifespan. Think of the phrase older but wiser. But things like our executive functions and memory decline. And these losses are the result of age-related changes in the brain. Now, declines in executive function are the result of changes in the prefrontal cortex. This is the CEO of the brain because it governs all of our higher order cognitive processes like executive functioning, planning, and self-regulation. Another brain region that changes with aging is the hippocampus, which is the main brain region involved in learning and memory. The hippocampus shrinks at a rate of about 0.5% per year in healthy aging, and it's about 8 times faster in people with Alzheimer's disease. That's why memory loss is so severe with Alzheimer's disease. Now, fortunately, our rate of decline is not set in stone. Instead of it being just one straight line down, it's more like this shaded region of possibility. The upper and lower boundaries of that range are set by biological factors like our genetics, but where we place within that range is impacted by lifestyle choices. A healthy lifestyle that includes a healthy diet, physical activity, and sufficient sleep put us at the upper end of that range, keeping us healthier for longer. Whereas things like smoking, heavy alcohol consumption, and physical inactivity, as well as chronic conditions including high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, and depression, put us at risk of falling below the functional threshold at an earlier age. Now, you might be asking yourself, what is a functional threshold? Well, it's the point at which our cognitive ability gets so bad that it warrants a clinical diagnosis of dementia. To give you an idea of what this looks like, let's walk through a common tool that is used in research and clinical practice to screen for dementia. Now, one of the most sensitive screening tools is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, otherwise known as the MoCA. And I would highly recommend using this for any intervention anybody in the chat is trying to run. The MoCA is great because it's quick, it's non-invasive, and it's highly reliable. The test is longer than what I'm going to show you, but here are a few of its tests. Now here, what I'm going to recommend is that you pretend that you're a patient, and through each step, you stop and try to do exactly what is explained. So I'll give about like 30 seconds for each task, and I really want you to either visualize, use your finger on the screen, or whatever you can to try and complete the task. The first thing that I want you to complete is on the left-hand side, the visual spatial task, I want you to make a trail going from number to letter in ascending order. So that would be like 1A, 2B, 3C, and so on. So I'm going to stop for about 30 seconds and ask you all to try doing that. Great. Now, hopefully that was enough time for that task. We'll move on to the next one. The next one is directly beside it, and it asks you to copy the cube. Try drawing it exactly as it is. Great. The final task is I want you to draw a clock with the time 10 past 11. Again, try to draw a clock with the time 10 past 11. Awesome. Well, how'd you do? That was probably really easy for you, but for anyone with cognitive impairment, those tasks would be difficult. Now, let's consider performance on the clock test. At first glance, drawing a clock might seem pretty simple, right? But in reality, it requires several different brain systems to work together at the same time. First, you need memory to remember what a clock looks like and where the numbers should go. Then you need visual spatial processing to judge space and place the numbers evenly around the circle. You need attention to stay focused on the task and not lose track of what you are doing. You need planning and organization to decide where to start and how to sequence the numbers or how to place the hands correctly. And you need inhibitory control to avoid putting the numbers in the wrong place or repeating them. All of these are a part of what we call executive functions and higher level thinking skills. And they're exactly the processes that often become compromised with dementia. So when someone struggles with a clock drawing task, it's not just about drawing. It can reflect broader changes in how different parts of the brain are communicating and working together. When a healthy person is asked to draw a clock at 2:30, they draw the clock perfectly. However, it's not perfect for the patient with mild cognitive impairment, who can draw a clock, but during the time it took them to draw the clock, they forgot what time they were supposed to draw. So, it's not 10 past 11, but 5 to 2. And the patient with Alzheimer's disease, well, they can draw a circle, but the rest of the drawing bears little resemblance to a clock because they totally forgot they were supposed to be drawing a clock in the first place. And simple clock drawing tests demonstrate the incredible changes that can happen with dementia. Now, Like I said, the actual test is much longer than this, but the whole thing can still be completed in about 15 minutes. The maximum score is 30, and the higher the score, the better. When we look at performance on the total MoCA score, we see a distribution based on brain health. Healthy individuals, which are pictured in green, have the highest score. People with mild cognitive impairment are shown in yellow, and people with Alzheimer's disease have the lowest scores. A score above 26 or greater is considered healthy, and no one with impairment will score above a 26. A score less than 18 is often used to differentiate mild cognitive impairment from Alzheimer's, and it's very unlikely that someone with Alzheimer's disease will score above an 18. So these are the standard cutoffs that are typically used in clinic and research. And one thing that I want you to notice about this graph is that for cognition, for Alzheimer's patients, it seems to be getting progressively worse, but the rate of decline is modifiable. So that's a brief overview of how cognition changes with aging and how tools like the MoCA can capture those changes. Now, let's explore common pathways to dementia. And unfortunately, it's tied to something we do every day. Here's the scenario. You're busy at work. Scratch that. Your mind is busy at work. Your body just sits there all day, every day, with little to no movement. When it's time for your annual checkup, you don't get the clean bill of health you were hoping for. High blood pressure? Really? Your doctor advises you to move more, but you don't. A year later, you're back at the doctor's office, and now you're in big trouble, at risk for cardiovascular disease. And what's worse, this increases your risk for dementia. So, how did you go from sitting too much to dementia risk? Well, it's actually easier than you may think. In fact, there are only 3 degrees of separation between sitting too much and dementia. Long periods of inactivity reduce how often your body uses glucose and fats for energy. That lowers your metabolic activity. Sitting for long periods of time also makes your blood vessels stiffer over time. Stiffer blood vessels and slower circulation mean that your heart has to work harder to move blood throughout your body, which can contribute to higher blood pressure. Your high blood pressure damages your heart and its vessels deteriorate. The small vessels that feed your brain get blocked, putting you at risk of small vessel disease. Without adequate blood supply, the brain's white matter starves to death. And this has important implications. You see, white matter acts like a telephone wire that connects brain regions so that they can talk to each other. When your white matter is damaged, the communication between those brain regions breaks and messages get lost. Your extensive white matter damage causes faster cognitive decline and puts you at risk for dementia, stroke, and death. Now, white matter hyperintensities are one of the main brain changes we see in vascular dementia, which is the second most common type of dementia. These appear as bright white areas on a brain scan and reflect the damage to the small blood vessels in the brain. When these small vessels become blocked or damaged, especially in the front parts of the brain, it can affect what we call executive functions. These are skills like focusing, planning, organizing, and filtering out distractions. You can think of executive functions as the brain's CEO. They help manage and coordinate everything else. In vascular dementia, these executive functions are often affected earlier and more stronger than memory. So people may notice more changes in attention, decision-making, or mental flexibility, even when memory seems relatively okay. We also see important differences across populations. For example, African Americans are at higher risk for vascular dementia in part because high blood pressure is more common and is less likely to be well controlled with treatment. This highlights a powerful mind-body connection. Conditions like high blood pressure directly affect the health of the brain by damaging the small blood vessels that supply it. On this scan, you can see a 64-year-old man with vascular dementia. The bright white areas show extensive white matter damage. There's also a small area of tissue loss in the right frontal part of the brain. These changes help explain why executive functions are often affected in vascular dementia. So, what about Alzheimer's disease? Well, prolonged sitting and low levels of physical activity also increase the risk for Alzheimer's, not just vascular dementia. Interestingly, the hippocampus, which is a key memory region of the brain, has a type of backup blood supply. This means that it can tolerate more blockage in small blood vessels before memory loss becomes obvious compared to other brain regions. But there is another important pathway to Alzheimer's that is closely linked to a sedentary lifestyle. This pathway involves metabolic conditions such as obesity and type 2 diabetes. These metabolic changes don't just affect the body, they also affect the brain, increasing inflammation, damaging blood vessels, and making the brain more vulnerable to Alzheimer's disease. And this is where we start to see how lifestyle, metabolism, and brain health are deeply connected. So, we just identified diabetes as a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. We also mentioned that dementia risk doesn't look the same for everyone, and that sometimes it differs based on a person's background and lived experiences. This is important because when we understand who is at higher risk and why, we can better understand the pathways that lead to dementia and where prevention efforts can make the biggest impact. Diabetes risk is shaped by a combination of factors. There are biological and genetic factors. There are lifestyle factors like physical activity, nutrition, and sleep. And there are also social and systemic factors like income, access to healthcare, neighborhood environments, chronic stress, and experiences of discrimination. What this means is that through multiple overlapping pathways, many racial and ethnic minorities and other marginalized groups face a higher risk of developing diabetes, not because of individual choices alone, but because of the environments and systems that they are navigating. Since diabetes increases the risk of dementia, these same pathways can also contribute to a higher vulnerability of Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia over the lifespan. This is why it's so important to think about brain health not just at the individual level, but also in the context of the social and environmental factors that shape people's opportunities to live healthy lives. Now, in clear terms, having high levels of sugar and fats circulating in the blood over long periods of time can create what we call oxidative stress. This is a type of damage that harms brain cells and can lead to the loss of neurons, particularly in areas that are critical for memory, like the hippocampus. You can see examples of this damage in the image on the slide. The same processes also affect blood vessels in the brain. That's why prolonged sitting and low levels of physical activity increase the risk for both Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia. When changes from both conditions are present, we call this mixed dementia. One of the most heartbreaking parts of this cycle is that people living with dementia often become some of the most sedentary individuals. For some, the most movement they get in a day is being transferred from a bed to a chair and back again. Unfortunately, this lack of movement can further accelerate physical and cognitive decline. But I want to be very clear here. This does not have to be the story. Many of these pathways are modifiable, and there are powerful ways to protect and support brain health through lifestyle and environmental changes. So the big question becomes, what can we actually do? What's the solution? Stand up. Yep, you heard me. Literally stand up right now. Move around for 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, whether that's going for a walk, standing in place and doing high knees, or putting on your favorite song and dancing. For me, it's the new Harry Styles song. Do that. I'm asking you to stand for 2 minutes and get some physical activity throughout this lecture. So we'll be back in 2 minutes. All right, great job, everyone. So I'm hopeful and wishful that though I can't see you, you are still able to get up and get some movement for those 2 minutes. Now, it's especially important if you're sitting for more than 4 hours. And the reason behind this is because sitting for that long reduces your brain's blood flow, and we just learned how bad that is for your brain's health. Now, one study showed that these stand up breaks could prevent the reduced blood flow from prolonged sitting. They tested three different scenarios: sit continuously for 4 hours, stand up every 30 minutes for a 2-minute movement break, or stand up every 2 hours for an 8-minute movement break. Now, although both breaks included the same amount of stand up time total, the people who took shorter, more frequent breaks resulted in more brain blood flow compared to the people who sat continuously. I'd now like you to rate how difficult you found that exercise break. A poll should appear on your screen, and I'll give everybody a moment to respond. Awesome. So I'm seeing the results come in, and I believe all of you can see it as well on your screen. And based on these results, it looks like most people did not find the exercise break very difficult. Given what we just learned about how movement supports brain blood flow, I encourage you to remember that feeling of completing something that supports your brain with relative ease. Small, manageable bouts of movement can make this meaningful difference over time. If you did find it difficult, and that's completely okay if you did, it doesn't mean anything is wrong. The key is to find a type of movement that you enjoy. That might be dancing, walking around the room, stretching, or anything that feels good to you. The goal is to move in ways that feel sustainable and enjoyable, so you're likely to keep doing them. Now, on top of the long-term benefits movement confers in terms of brain health, research from our lab has shown that a little movement can go a long way when it comes to helping our brain stay focused. Now, this study was done in university students while they watched an online lecture. The reality is that the brain cannot stay focused even for the most engaging professors. The graphs show how students' attention declines across a lecture. Our lab has shown that a 5-minute exercise break is better than no breaks or sedentary breaks when it comes to helping students stay on task. And because they are more focused during lecture, they had better memory for the lecture material when later tested. The same is true for the workplace, where focus means greater productivity. Now, in this study, we used high intensity body weight exercises, but light and moderate movements would work too. That's because within the first 15 minutes of exercise, all intensities all yield the same boost in oxygenated blood flow to the brain. So, a short walk to the water cooler would be enough. So, we've looked at how cognition changes with aging and the paths to dementia with one solution on how to use movement to break up your sitting time. Now, what else should we be doing for our brain health? Or more specifically, what simple lifestyle changes can you make now that will fortify our brain health for years to come? Now, it's important to give this some context. The primary driver of brain health in aging is atrophy or loss. For example, in the case of Alzheimer's, there is severe atrophy or death in the cells of the hippocampus. Now, atrophy will dominate unless we intervene with a healthy lifestyle. And that's because healthy lifestyles promote plasticity, which is an opposing force that promotes growth and reorganization. And most importantly, with the right stimulus, the brain is capable of amazing plasticity until the day that we die. Now, plasticity shows up in the brain in three ways. One, neurogenesis, as defined by the birth of brand new brain cells. The second is angiogenesis, or the formation of new blood vessels that will supply the brain with the vital nutrients it needs to thrive. The third is synaptogenesis, or the creation of novel connections between existing brain cells. Together, these plastic changes help build a stronger, more resilient brain with greater functional capacity. In other words, your brain is not fixed. It is constantly remodeling itself in response to how you move, think, and live. Now, if we were to plot the neural connections of an older brain, it might look something like this. Imagine the brain needs to send a message from point A to point B. It has one path to get there. What happens when that path gets blocked? There is a damaged cell, an amyloid plaque, or a broken blood vessel. Now what? For the older brain without plasticity, that path was the path, the only option, and now that path is blocked and the message can't be sent. This shows up as cognitive impairment. Now, in contrast, an older brain that has plasticity has more pathways and more options. If one path is blocked, no problem. It takes a detour. The message gets sent and cognition remains high. This is why plasticity is so important, especially as we age, because these roadblocks will come up more often. So here are some key here are some key lifestyle factors that will promote plasticity. We've got physical activity, cognitive stimulation, social connections, consuming healthy foods and beverages, and implementing stress reduction techniques. These are all things that we need to include in our life. Now, to illustrate how plasticity shows up in real brains, let's consider two studies. The first used a language task, which is typically processed in the left prefrontal cortex, and in younger adults, we see that the left hemisphere is activated. But high-performing older adults need to recruit both hemispheres, the left and the right, to perform the same task, suggesting that they are recruiting additional brain regions to compensate for a blockage or impairment. Here's another study. This one used a visual spatial working memory, which is typically processed in the right prefrontal cortex. And in younger adults, we see that the right hemisphere is activated. In healthy older adults who performed well on the task, again, we see that they are recruiting additional brain regions to perform well. But in this study, however, not everyone showed an adaptive change. Some older adults tried to process the task the way as the younger adults, but without the additional brain regions supporting their performance, they were impaired. Dr. Heise's research shows that physical activity helps promote adaptive changes in older brains. Although some physical activity is better than none, we found that one activity in particular is really good for the brain, and that's interval walking. So you might be asking, what's interval walking? Well, it's simple, and you can integrate it into your daily walk. So you start a walk for 3 minutes at an easy pace. You then walk for 3 minutes at a faster pace. You repeat this 5 times. And compared to regular, steady-paced walking, interval walking has been shown to lead to bigger improvements in several key areas that matter for our brain health. First, it can significantly increase your VO2 max, which is a measure of your cardiorespiratory fitness. On average, people can see increases of around 5 points, especially if their fitness is low to begin with. Higher cardiorespiratory fitness is one of the strongest lifestyle-related predictors of better brain health and lower dementia risk. Second, interval walking is particularly effective at lowering blood pressure, especially in people who start with higher blood pressure. Since high blood pressure is a major risk factor for vascular damage in the brain, lowering it protects both the heart and the brain. Third, interval walking can improve how your body regulates blood sugar. This is especially important for people with type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance. Better sugar control reduces inflammation and blood vessel damage, which are key pathways linking diabetes to dementia risk. So, when you improve fitness, lower blood pressure, and improve your blood sugar at the same time, you're not just helping your physical health, you're also reducing the multiple biological pathways that contribute to dementia risk. Now, this is a great example of how one simple habit can have a ripple effect across the heart, the body, and the brain. And the best part, interval walking improves memory. Our lab tested out the effect of interval walking on memory with 64 sedentary seniors that were enrolled in our community-based program held at our local seniors gym called the Physical Activity Center of Excellence. Exercise sessions were supervised 3 times per week for 12 weeks. As the participants' fitness improved, we increased the speed and incline of the treadmill to achieve the target intensity. We tested 3 groups: the control, who did light stretching, the regular walkers, and the interval walkers. After just 12 weeks of interval walking, the seniors' memory had improved by 30%, which was better than regular walking or stretching. And their improvement in memory was directly related to their fitness gains. This demonstrates how important higher intensity exercise is for memory. Now, you might be asking, why is higher intensity exercise better for memory? Well, it's likely lactate. Now, you've probably heard of lactate or lactic acid. It's what builds up in the muscle during exercise. For a long time, it was wrongly associated with just the burning sensation in the muscles, and scientists thought it was toxic for the brain. However, it turns out that lactate is not toxic at all, but may be a powerful promoter of neuroplasticity. During high-intensity exercise, lactate builds up in the blood in the muscle, spills out into the bloodstream, and travels across the blood-brain barrier and reports to the hippocampus. Here, lactate acts as a fuel source for brain cells. It also activates a growth factor called brain-derived neurotrophic factor that acts like Miracle-Gro for brain cells, helping brain cells grow stronger and thus improving memory. Now, how do you know if you're exercising vigorously enough? Well, you should use the talk test. Start exercising and ask yourself, can I talk comfortably right now? If the answer is yes, then this is a good pace for the easy intervals. Now, pick up the pace and ask yourself again, can I talk comfortably right now? When your answer becomes no, then this is a good pace for hard intervals. During your regular walk, it's as easy as picking up the pace between light posts, adding a few hills to your walk, and this might be the best way to move your body to improve your memory and keep dementia at bay. Now, some of the latest research is suggesting that women's brains may have a greater propensity for plasticity, especially during times of transition like puberty, postpartum, and menopause, when fluctuating hormones may create a window of opportunity where change is more likely. Just look at the brain regions impacted by estrogen. These include the PFC, remember the brain CEO, and hippocampus, which we just discussed are vital for brain health and aging. So stay tuned as this research evolves. Now, one final thing I want to leave with is the reassurance that it's never too late to start. Starting a positive lifestyle change at any point in adulthood can help to alter the path of cognitive functioning. Even people with dementia stand to benefit from intervention. It's not a cure, but it can help to slow decline and improve the quality of life so that they can live healthier for longer. So it really is never too late. With that, today we've discussed how cognition changes with aging, the different pathways that can lead to dementia, and how you can use lifestyle and other interventions to support your brain health as you age. My hope is that today's presentation has given you not only information, but also a sense of hope and the knowledge that and confidence to make choices that support your brain health and overall well-being. More than anything, I hope it helps you see that aging is not something to fear, but a stage of life that you can approach with intention, resilience, and optimism, filled with meaningful moments and memories of a life well lived. And I'll end by thanking our incredible team at the NeuroFit Lab, our funding sources, and you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Anjali. That was wonderful. Oh, I have lots of questions. But before we ask my question, I don't want to dominate. So Trisha's asking, what if walking is too painful? She uses a rowing machine. Is that good? So, the study that the lab did looked at the interval walking, but I'm assuming that could be like maybe swimming, or the idea is you want to do something that's slower and then just bringing the heart rate up. Is that correct?
Absolutely, that is correct. So intensity is really what matters. And obviously, choosing something that does not cause pain is of the utmost importance. We don't want you to choose walking if it's not something that's comfortable. And so even with rowing, if you alternate it in terms of the bouts that you can do shorter bouts if you want, where it's like 2 minutes of easy walking and then 2 minutes of easy rowing and then 1 minute of a hard pace. That's something we recommend. What we want to say is that you start to incorporate some higher intensity to experience some of these benefits, and it's going to show benefits regardless of the physical activity that you choose to use it for.
Great. Joe has put in In Italian, they say, if you sit on a couch, you become a couch.
Wow, that is definitely a saying. Yeah, it's so important to avoid a sedentary lifestyle in order to maintain the cognitive functioning and being able to be independent throughout your life. Activity really is a powerful medicine that we can use for many conditions, not just dementia, but many ones that are relating to the heart, the brain, the body, the mind, everything. So. Yes, definitely exercise. Don't just sit on the couch.
So I have a question for you. So there's a couple things you said that I'm curious about. So you said something about the age of 30. This is my memory, I can't remember. But basically you're saying, by the time we hit our 30s, that's when we start to see a slight cognitive decline. Is that correct?
Yes, your
Yes.
cognitive abilities do peak at the age of 30, and
That's
then we do see that slight drop off
yeah.
after.
Which is part of the natural aging process because your cells are getting older and whatever. And then you did say just a few moments ago that there's no time where you can't start. Like it's never too late to start. But can you bank your activity? So let's say, you use that example of the sort of midlife woman. So in your 20s and 30s, you're really active, and then maybe your career starts to get really complicated. You might have a family. And so there's sort of, like midlife, you sort of slow down, and then your kids leave, or maybe you're retired, and then you ramp up again. Is is that okay, or no? You can't bank activity for the brain.
I completely get what you're trying to say. And from what I understand, there's not really a repository that you can hold all of the activity from early life in. And it's really neat that you bring in that midlife age range because that's what my research actually focuses on. And the reason behind it is that during midlife, like you said, there's a bunch of things going on that contribute to different lifestyle factors, a lack of sleep due to family and work commitments. And there's just so much happening in midlife that really what happens is that these stressors accumulate and actually can accelerate your path to cognitive decline. So, in what you said about banking, it's actually really important that you stay active throughout the lifespan in order to prevent the decline that we see in health prior to any apparent memory loss in midlife. But again, I want to emphasize that if you are watching this and you are a person that maybe has taken a step back from those healthy habits in midlife due to commitments, you're not alone. It's common, it happens, but it's never too late to start. And you can absolutely implement changes now that will alter the trajectory of your brain health. In fact, midlife as a time period is one of the most important periods to make a change, and it can have the most significant impacts on your brain health in later life.
So I'm just thinking, I'm a parent with two children. So, hockey is a big Canadian culture thing. You're in the rink. So I guess every half hour, you go up and you walk around the rink, right, for 2 minutes. And that way you can still see your child play, or the soccer field or the field hockey, or whatever it is, instead of just sitting in the bleachers and not doing anything,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah.
Yes. My little brother played football throughout our younger years. And what I remember that my mom would do would be she would walk around the track whenever there was a practice or something just to keep moving. And those small intentional choices are things that will impact your later life outcomes.
Wonderful. Okay, so everyone get moving. Okay, so let's get in here. Um, Oh, yes. Valerie is 87 years old, still cross-country skiing. God bless Valerie. Can I pass this presentation on to my friends? You absolutely can. And just a reminder, this is being recorded, and hopefully I'll send out the recording tomorrow. So yes, please pass this along to as many people as you want. And maybe people who are on this webinar, you could start little groups with your friends to get moving. Um, so obesity, 30 pounds obesity, 30 pounds have impact on developing dementia? I think that's a
So
question.
obesity in general is a risk factor for dementia due to an increased fat accumulation that is also related to inflammation. It's also related to poor lifestyle habits like a lack of exercise and a poor diet. And all of those things will compound to increase your dementia risk through either decreased metabolism, so not using the glucose and fat stores that we have to power the brain, as well as the lack of exercise. We talked about the different ways that your blood vessels will become very stiff and you get high blood pressure and how that impacts your risk of vascular dementia. So yes, obesity is definitely a risk factor for dementia, but it is not a guaranteed pathway, and there are definitely lifestyle changes that you can make to change your risk trajectory.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. So Krishna's asking, I noticed that you mentioned that depression is one of the early risk factors that could contribute to dementia risk. Is that also related to exercise as well, assuming that those with depression tend to get less exercise for a variety of reasons? Or are there other physiological factors we see with depression that could further your dementia risk?
Yeah, great question. So 100%, people with depression are less likely to be physically active. However, I'm not going to sit here and say that's the main pathway that depression or the degrees of separation that separate depression and dementia. What's highly likely as well is people with depression ultimately have increased levels of inflammation. And the reason that I keep on bringing up inflammation is really, really bad for your brain because it's in a state where there's a bunch of panic happening essentially. And it thinks that it is in danger. And so the body reacts as a result of that. So I believe that one alternate pathway that doesn't include fitness in terms of the relationship to from depression and dementia is likely that inflammation link. It's also actually really neat that you bring it up because you just talked about fitness groups. And fitness groups are also really, really helpful. Obviously, they help you stay active, but they increase your social interaction. And another huge risk factor for dementia is isolation. And so people with depression are also often extremely isolated, and that also contributes to increased dementia risk. So obviously you can see that for many of the risk factors that we'll talk about, there's a variety of pathways, whether that's physiological, psychological, or social, that can result in it having an impact on dementia in late life.
I do remember. So, uh, Jennifer Heiss, your PhD supervisor, I remember she did a talk for me, 15 years ago, let's say. It was down at the Hamilton Public Library. No, sorry, the AGO, the art gallery. And she said, next to going out and doing things socially, like going for a walk or going for a hike, she said the next best thing you could do is play bridge because it's such a social card game and it uses strategy. So I've joked with my girlfriends that, we're going to have our hiking group and then we're going to go play cards afterwards. So we're getting all this social stuff.
No, it's so good to have activities that combine, or even separate activities for the social bit and then the active bit. There's also the option to actually complete activities that combine a cognitive component and a physical activity component. So things like Zumba classes, dancing, anything like that, which requires the movement of the body and also coordination of different movements that require the cognitive processing of your mind, have been shown to be extremely beneficial for maintaining cognitive functioning over the lifespan.
How about gardening? Sorry, and then I'll get to Krishna's because many people love gardening. Maybe there's a meditative aspect to it, which runs into Krishna's. Um, but yes, and I think gardening is becoming less popular. Like I think it's um, I don't want to say it's an old person's, but I think, many younger people live in condos or they're living still with their parents. So gardening, what are your thoughts on gardening? Although you can't do like those intervals.
No, very good question. And the greatest thing to note is that with gardening, it's not necessarily a goal, I would say, to incorporate higher intensity activity every single time that you do something. If gardening is a passion, it brings you joy, do it. It's physically active, you're outside. It is quite labor intensive. I've tried to do it and I can't keep up with my brother and my mom. It's definitely not where I like to see myself, but it is a great activity. And the other reason why it is so good, other than it being people's passion, is because it is outside. And being outside in nature has actually shown to be tremendously beneficial for brain health.
So Krishna has a follow-up. Thanks for the great response. Building on that answer, the one you gave before, could meditation also be viewed as a preventative measure in order to reduce the inflammation that you were talking about in the brain? Has your work considered the effects of meditation, or have you come across any interesting papers, research that have also looked into this?
Yeah, meditation is actually a great stress reduction technique. And the reason that it is such a great technique is that we know that stress is linked to chronic inflammation in the body. And as we just discussed, chronic inflammation, so bad for the brain, bad for health overall. So, any technique that reduces the amount of inflammation in your body, whether that's meditation or mindfulness practices, which is something I've looked at for caregivers of people with dementia, has been shown to improve one's psychological and physiological health.
And we do run, I don't know if Krishna's part of, we haven't done it this year. I'm hoping we can do it in the spring, but we do offer meditation on a Friday afternoons, and we love it. It's just 15 minutes. Actually, it's even less. It's 10 minutes. We have a facilitator that runs through meditation. And, at the end of it, even though it's just a short period of time, you just feel so relaxed and so focused, and all your stress and anger or whatever emotions you were feeling, they all just get kicked to the curb.
Absolutely. It's a great technique.
So Martha is asking, are we all going to get dementia anyway? Oh gosh, I hope not, Martha.
No, I hope that this presentation has shown you that that doesn't have to be a definite outcome and that there are many things within our control that we can do to change what was once perceived as a definite outcome. We now understand that modifiable factors, so things like what you choose to eat, how much you choose to sleep, how much you choose to exercise, can all impact your late life outcomes. So the answer is that there is a part of it that is within our hands that we can change, and that by implementing these small changes, like getting up once every 30 minutes, so you guys are due for another stand-up break in about 5 minutes, but getting up that'll improve your brain blood flow, all of those things that you do, the small choices you make, I can promise you will have an impact later in life.
Sorry, there's Bill just commented that he's part of our mindfulness community. And he's like, thanks for mentioning Shrey. Okay, so Mary is asking, oh, this is a good question. Is there more dementia in Canada because we have to spend so much more time inside during the cold, dark winters? Are snowbirds less likely to have dementia?
Mary, I think you just proposed a study for us to look into with regards to snowbirds. But I would definitely say that a lack of sun exposure, meaning honestly an extreme deficiency in vitamin D across our population, does have an impact on our dementia risk profiles. Other than that, in terms of the amount of dementia that we see within Canada, it's also largely due to immigration patterns. So, people of diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds and women are actually more likely to be diagnosed with dementia than their counterparts. And so, due to changing immigration patterns within our country, we are seeing an influx of dementia cases, and we're expecting these patterns to shift as immigration shifts throughout the coming years.
Oh, can I ask, why is that?
That people of racial and ethnic minorities are diagnosed more? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good question. So, different groups have different risk factors that increase their susceptibility. However, the primary drivers are thought to be systemic inequities that lead to higher chronic stress over the lifetime. And chronic stress over the lifetime increases inflammation. And ultimately, what that does is it shrinks the brain at a much faster rate than other populations.
Oh, wow, that's
So it's
awful.
also It is. So many marginalized populations are faced with this increased rate or increased risk of dementia due to these factors that are both systemic and then also some are genetic. There's people that are predisposed to those risk factors like hypertension, diabetes, and all of these other factors that ultimately increase your dementia risk as well. So it is a harsh cycle that ultimately results in this.
Oh, wow, that's not good at all. So Marianne is asking, what if you do a brisk walk the whole time you're out? Is that not as effective?
So, based on the research presented, we're seeing that interspersing some sort of high intensity interval is more effective than doing a brisk walk on its own without any high intensity intervals. However, I just want to clarify once again that if you are unable to, that brisk walk is still very important to complete, and this should not be a reason to not walk at all.
So, and maybe someone just prefers to brisk walk.
Yeah, and that's okay. Any movement is good movement.
So, are there different activities you recommend for people with dementia at early versus later stages, especially for family members supporting them?
Absolutely. And I do want to start this off by quickly mentioning that I am not a certified health professional, and anything that you are recommending to a person with dementia or somebody with safety concerns, I would recommend you take up with their healthcare practitioner, an occupational therapist, or a physical therapist. And they will have recommendations for early versus late stage as a result of differing cognitive abilities throughout the course of the dementia time. I can tell you that brisk walks are really, really good, or even slow-paced walks are awesome. It's something that my grandmother with dementia still does to this day. She'll take a lap around her apartment hallway, and that physical activity is so important for her. That's something that works for her. Again, you have to appeal to what the person with dementia likes doing, and that's the most important thing is finding something that's enjoyable and not a chore.
Mhm. So Sylvia's asking, what else can you do to reduce inflammation? So we have, the mindfulness is good, obviously exercise is good, trying to reduce your stress.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Eating healthy.
Mhm.
Certain foods cause a like short-term grade inflammation within the body. And so making sure that you are having foods that don't cause that or it's a good pathway to add on to all of the other lifestyle changes that we've discussed today.
Martha is just saying, so motion is lotion. And I'm
That
just
is
saying,
correct.
yes,
That
it
is
is.
correct.
Uh, so Christine is asking, can you review the method of interval walking? Can you just talk about that again?
Absolutely. So interval walking involves walking at a slow, easy pace for 3 minutes, then walking at a hard pace for 3 minutes, and repeating that cycle 5 times. So it's about a 30-minute walk if I can do math correctly. Yeah, 3 + 3 × 5.
And how about, I guess another thing, instead of like walking briskly, you could go up a hill, right? Because that
Yep,
will increase your effort as well.
exactly. Anything that makes the walk feel more difficult, where it's like, okay, I definitely cannot maintain a conversation during this bit.
And for all of us who live in Hamilton, you could do the stairs, the Shadoke or the Wentworth stairs, the Shadoke stairs, the Dundurn stairs. That would get your heart going. Okay, let's maybe Allison is asking me, can you work your way up to intervals like in a couch to five? Oh, yeah, yeah. So can you work your way up to intervals? I think instead of just going out one time and doing the 3 and 3, if you're, I think this is maybe what Allison's asking, if you're coming from a sedentary background, maybe just like doing 3 and 1s, like I do understand what I'm
Absolutely.
what I'm
So
trying to
you
say.
don't,
I
yes,
think that's
you
what
don't,
Allison's trying to say.
no, you don't have to do it all at once to receive all of the benefits. It's a great idea to start implementing changes on a slower basis, and that's actually what makes habits stick a lot better. So the reason that a lot of New Year's resolutions in terms of fitness drop off is because we go from being completely sedentary to being like, I'm gonna go to the gym 5 times this week, every week for the rest of the year. And that's not a sustainable change that we can make because it's not a practice that we have had. So the recommendation is always to start slow, manageable bits, and then increase your way up.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think it's more reasonable and probably not as daunting, right? Especially for someone who's coming from maybe a more sedentary background. It's like, oh, well, Anjali told me I had to go for 30 minutes and do 3 minutes easy, 3 minutes hard, and do that 5 times. And yeah, that's, as you said, it's not going to be enjoyable. And that's what we want people to do. We want people to engage in activities that are enjoyable.
Absolutely.
Well, I am mindful of the time. It is after 8. So, oh, okay, wait, sorry. I'm going to go back. Sarah, you squeaked one last question in. So Sarah's asking, why is 3 mins a magical number with interval walking? Do I need to time it strictly?
Good question. So 3 minutes is the value that we used within this study in order to evaluate a group of sedentary uh, individuals and the benefits that interval walking could have. The number was chosen for a variety of reasons. One of them being what felt manageable in terms of the easy part and the hard part, and then interspersing it. However, what I will say is that you don't have to stick to it like a strict science in order to get the same benefits. If you find that different intervals for you work in terms of interspersing the hard and easy, do that. Everything is about listening to your body and what feels most beneficial. What we've laid out here today is just some preliminary guidelines to really encourage you to get higher intensity exercise interspersed with the lower bits. And that's the main thing to take away from today, not the strict numbers.
Just the mix.
Yeah.
The mix. Well, I think on that note, that is wonderful information, and I hope everyone enjoys. Now, most people are probably coming from Canada, and I think all of us, maybe with the exception of people in Vancouver, are covered in snow. So getting out and walking may be a little more difficult. So take care. But as Diana's saying, you could do on the bike, and someone else was saying, on the rowing machine, you can go to the gym. So there are ways to, or you could be a snowbird, but maybe not in the United States. Maybe you could go to Portugal or Spain or something to get some nice weather. So I think whatever you can do that's manageable, you just want to get and you want to be moving, and people need to get up because it's over 30 minutes and you need to get off of this webinar and do some exercise.
Yeah.
So thank you, Anjali. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you, everyone, for all of your questions in the chat and in the Q&A. And as I mentioned, I will be sending this link out to everyone. So feel free to share that with your friends, and yeah, maybe start a walking group or a swimming group or a card group or a gardening group or something so that you can stay motivated with your friends. Thanks, everyone, and have a great evening and stay warm. Oh, also, yes, we have our last talk. Sorry, Dave. We have our last talk on Tuesday about shrinkflation with a economics professor who is going to be talking to us about why we seem to be paying more for smaller packages when we go to the grocery store. It's going to be a great talk. So there you can whip out your phone, get the QR code, and register for that. And I'll also put a link to that talk in the email that I'll be sending out. All right, enough for me. Thanks, everyone. Go exercise. Take care.